I think there is something to be said about hubris. Something to be said about old glorious fleeting. It can lead to the downfall of many men thought too great to touch. Even nations can crumble due to it. And in this case, an entire industry is on the edge of collapse. The too big to fail. The pillars of the industry. A foundational company with its roots all the way back to the 1980s, Electronic Arts. Yeah, I'm not the first one to make that joke, but fuck you, it's apt. Arguably one of the largest publishers in the world next to Activision Blizzard, and with Ubisoft tagging along, EA has been a dominant publisher for over 20 years. And no, Valve doesn't count anymore. Half-Life 3, or get the fuck out, but I'll still buy your games on Steam because fuck, I'm not going to go to GOG to get overpriced ROMs and the ones I want no longer exist. But that's what piracy is for. While EA is synonymous with the high-end blockbuster games, just like great movie studios before that, even in the face of insane amounts of success can somehow still lead to failure, they're going to run into the same fate. For f***'s sakes, Rise of the Guardians made $303 million and it still killed the studio? What were they doing with all the marketing money? Literally grinding it up into Sandman's dust and chucking it into the wind? But if you feel as I do, a reality check is long overdue to the largest AAA gaming monolith, and to this longtime gamer furry, it's long over f***ing due. Electronic Arts has been in the gaming industry for over 3 decades. Its pedigree is undeniable. I remember playing NHL 94 on the Sega Genesis. I remember playing Ultima, Command & Conquer, and Desert Strike. The original Medal of Honor series kicked ass long before Call of Duty ever did. A whole lineup of childhood memories shunted to the ash heap of history as the cold grip of death creeps ever so close. These were not just my childhood, this was what gaming was about. Pioneering and groundbreaking games that could stand up today on any indie platform like Steam or GOG if given a re-release, or a good polishing in graphics. Sadly, with placing yourself on top of a mountain and declaring yourself king, it leads to the current state of affairs of forgetting making money may be great, but if you can't settle for anything less than all the money in the world or not doing it at all, that would explain EA's development output last decade. But in the last 5 years, have you noticed something? Flop after flop after flop after flop would have destroyed any other company. But how the hell has EA managed to keep going? That money pile would eventually run out for anybody. It was their little cash cow that has been in place since the 1990s that has truly protected the gaming giant for this long. EA Sports. It's in the f***ing game. If anything has protected EA from itself, it was one singular license agreement that is keeping every one of its mistakes from utterly and deservingly destroying it from the market and bankrupting the company that deserves it the most. It's having FIFA, Madden, NBA, and NHL contracts intact for the better part of 2 decades. If FIFA at least accounts for 6% of their sales every year, I can safely assume that a quarter of their sales come through just their sports licensing games, keeping a nice buffer of profit for it every single year. You know, because buying the same game with just a graphics upgrade and a roster update is just what everyone seems to do every year. If it wasn't for that early decision back in the 90s, EA would have been on the ash heap of history over a decade ago. The buffer of those sports games has protected it from every single failure to date and fueled the destruction of multiple partner studios to sacrifice on the altar of staying in business. Those that only want to play FIFA or NBA were their bread and butter. I know people who just buy sports games because they want to play their home team of pick your particular sport, and that's fine. Even that now is starting to get cracks in the armor. Only because of the loot box and microtransactions, and it wasn't the SJWs or the diversity brigade like everyone loves to blame. These cracks were a long time building or were always there. You just didn't see it because they made good games. About a decade ago, when it wasn't the other studios, before they ripped off their faces and stuck it to themselves pretending to be that studio, remember what happened to BioWare? To think they were untouchable, they could absorb another game studio to rush out another annual game release and then close it with impunity. But now, in 2018, it got slapped right back in the face so hard I think even some of the tone-deaf executives finally looked up from their piles of cocaine and tax evasion to the Cayman Islands to realize that this little game of theirs might soon be up. Because EA is the biggest and ugliest stain upon the gaming industry that will drag it right down with it out of spite, just like the last juggernaut did. Atari! Atari! Let me elaborate. In the past 2 years, EA's flaws have come to light in some stark ways, commonly blamed on the rainbow-haired coalition of the permanently offended we all know and love to meme. But these people are no more to blame for the current state of affairs because the true nature of the gaming industry is far more than singular and far more sinister. That's like blaming a dock worker for a shipwreck when the captain was drunk off his ass. These people might be a story writer or developer out of dozens or hundreds of people in the studio, but they're not entirely the guiding hand of the industry long ago forsake quality for a quarterly return. You think Mass Effect Andromeda was bad because some SJW writers existed? How about the outsourcing of the facial animations to a third-party studio? The original story of the First Contact War thrown away for a crowbarred and uninspired story we weren't given a reason to care about. The worst part is, looking at the characters, they're just fine, which is a shame. I wish they had a better story to go with them, and facial animation, and gameplay, and mechanics, and it's not buggy as f***. And then came Battlefront 2, the apology for Battlefront 1. Does EA think people are so forgetful they would forget the insult that was the last game? You had someone already do the job for you a decade and a half ago, twice, and you couldn't make it work? Oh, that's right. You needed microtransactions, the DLC day one content, and a story that was an afterthought and made canon. But this isn't for some reason, but could have been as good as either movies given enough time and attention. Now, Disney is to blame for this a little bit, discarding most of the Star Wars canon because they were afraid of it because it might be too hard to keep track of. But they weren't afraid of anyone who invested time and money into this universe not notice their lazy attempts to steal from it without anyone noticing. Jason Solo beat Ben Solo. Oh wait, he's looking in a fucking mirror. If there ever was a separation between gaming developers, the gamers' goodwill, and the board of directors of EA, it was long before the Star Wars license trouble. I have proof of this. Think back to the last 5 years of games EA's put out. Well, not put out because they don't make it anymore. It's somebody else's studio with their name on it. Tell me a game that wasn't a massive flop. Battlefield Hardline, failure. Medal of Honor Warfighter, failure. Army of Two, shit. Dead Space 3, f*** you EA. Do I need to go on? I know I'm harping on this SJW blame, but really take a look at these games. What the hell did that have to do with them? Rush, designed by committee, and a focus on microtransactions, season passes, and nickel and diming gamers to bank on what they call whales. What the hell does that have to do with droning on surface level emotional connection to intersectionality? You could mark the real start of the downfall when they killed Maxis Studios, and with SimCity being a forced always online game even when it didn't need to be before that. The current failure of Battlefield 5 was only the last in a long line of failure crescendo because gamers being taken advantage of, lied to, told to pay for a game or get lost by a COO, then blame the backlash on Gamergate, a movement that's been dead for nearly 6 years, and declaring anyone who didn't like the game entitled children not getting what they wanted. By the way, if you think those comments had nothing to do with him leaving less than a month after this little interview, I have a bridge to sell you. But you want to know what I think? EA deserves this. If I had 3 wishes, it would be these 3. Wish 1, the NFL, the NHL, the NBA, and any other sports organization decide to pull their license from EA, leaving them with no fallback when all goes wrong. I just want to watch their stock price plummet more than it did this year. That alone would be worth it. Second, that Disney realizes that they could, with all their money, self-publish and yank their license by the end of next year. They could easily open up to other developers who deserve a chance to contribute to the franchise. Don't tell me you wouldn't be praising the House of Mouse then. And lastly, and this is just me, I want Anthem to fail. Horribly. Abysmally. Completely fucking tank. Not because I want the game developers and employees to lose their jobs. That was going to happen to them anyway once the game was released, and after 6 months of crunch working, some game developers believe they have to put up with as a rite of passage or some bullshit version of abuse they get to put up through as if it is normal to any other medium. Oh, they were going to have a 10-year plan? Tell that to Destiny. See how well that worked. I want it to fail so that all of the above just might happen because EA has sucked off the life force of other developers, contributed nothing in the past 2 decades, anything past the gaming industry, and demanded loyalty of its customers when it earned none of it. The worst aspects of microtransactions that are just Skinner box gambling, pay-to-win mechanics, and games for millions more. They have made a near Galactus level absorbing of great game studios and sapping every bit of life out of them until they're nothing but husks and discarded to the trash because of profits. This reckoning is well-deserved, and I don't have 1 ounce of pity for anyone who works there. They have ruined careers and livelihoods for the sake of a board of directors who only see gaming as a return of investment. Now, I can hear people ask me why I'm so lustful for the death of EA. They're just video games, just for children, or some other out-of-touch bullshit people like to think about video games to this very day. No, this is about principle. EA has destroyed game studios. That means they have put thousands out of work for their own bottom line. If this was any other industry in the corporate world, they'd be seen as hedge fund predators or hostile acquisition firm ass with the intentional sabotage of companies and then sell off their assets in a bankruptcy scheme. EA has, through its own direction to its hostage developers, set itself up for its own execution. And don't lie, every one of you watching this right now would pull up a lawn chair, get the popcorn, and watch EA burn out the steak with glee. But this is just my opinion. Please like, favorite, comment, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. You already know what I mean. This is Jack Gazi heading back on patrol just for the fun of it.